The Day the Galaxy Learned to Ask, Why Not? A story of first contact, hidden fears, and unexpected friends. The diplomatic vessel materialized from its quantum corridor with all the elegance of a dropped sandwich. Ambassador Torvin grabbed the command console, his four eyes blinking in rapid sequence as the disorientation of deep space transit cleared from his mind. Around him, his crew of 14 moved through their practiced routines, scanning the unremarkable solar system spread before them. "Target system confirmed," his navigator announced, her voice carrying the soft harmonic quality unique to her species. "Fourth planet from the star. Initial scans show—" She paused. "Ambassador, these readings cannot be correct." Torvin moved to her station, his tall form folding in ways that would have alarmed a structural engineer. He studied the data with growing unease. "Run diagnostics. These readings suggest quantum fold signatures blanketing the entire system, impossible for a civilization that only achieved faster-than-light capability within the last century." "Diagnostics complete. Sensors fully functional, sir." The familiar tightness settled in Torvin's chest. In his 180 years of service to the Galactic Accord, he had conducted 39 first contact procedures. The process was always identical. A young civilization stumbled into FTL travel, announced itself across the stars through sheer accidental broadcasting, and within months an Accord diplomat arrived to explain how things worked. The Galactic Accord had maintained order for 11,000 years, 863 species, a carefully calibrated hierarchy built on technological achievement. It was elegant. It was stable. It made sense. "Establish standard first contact protocols," Torvin ordered. "Broadcast on all common frequencies." The response arrived in 9 seconds. Not minutes, seconds. "Ambassador, we're receiving a reply, full audio and visual." His communications officer turned slowly. "Sir, they're speaking Accord standard, fluent, unaccented. Feed it through." The view screen brightened to reveal a human face, a woman perhaps 35 years old, with warm brown skin, dark hair pulled into a practical braid, and eyes that sparkled with what Torvin had learned across many species to identify as barely suppressed amusement. "Greetings, Ambassador Torvin of the Galactic Accord. I'm Director Amara Osei of Earth's First Contact Division. We've been expecting you. Would you prefer to conduct preliminary discussions aboard your vessel, or shall we use the diplomatic platform we've prepared?" Torvin's training operated independently of his shock. They knew his name, they knew he was coming, and they spoke his language as native speakers. "Director Osei, your preparedness is remarkable. However, our protocols require that we provide the meeting environment." Amara's smile widened slightly. "With respect, Ambassador, your vessel isn't optimally configured for a comfortable exchange. We've prepared a small neutral craft, safe, comfortable, and fully aligned with every specification in your contact codex. We accessed the complete Accord First Contact guidelines from your public database. Very thorough document." "You accessed our database?" "Well, yes, it's publicly hosted. We assumed the information was meant to be shared. If we've committed some breach of protocol, we genuinely apologize. We're still learning your customs." Torvin exchanged a glance with his first officer, a veteran named Grath, whose species had fought in 17 documented border conflicts. Grath's expression was unreadable, but his hand had drifted towards his sidearm. 20 minutes later, Torvin stepped through the airlock of the human vessel, and every sensor in his diplomatic suit activated simultaneously. The craft was small as promised, perhaps 50 meters stern to bow, but the moment he stepped inside, the readings made no sense. The walls hummed with power signatures that violated 3 separate conservation laws. Gravity adjusted perfectly to his physiology with no visible emitters. The atmospheric composition matched his species' needs down to trace elements that most civilizations forgot existed. Director Osei waited in a meeting room furnished simply, a table, comfortable chairs, a small window looking out at stars. She poured water into 2 glasses and slid one across. "Please sit. We calibrated the environment to your physiological profile. The public records were quite detailed. I hope everything is comfortable." Torvin sat, his training warred with his growing bewilderment. "Director, I must ask, how did you construct this vessel? Our sensors detect quantum fold signatures that suggest technology far beyond." The door opened. A child entered. She was perhaps 11 years old, carrying a school bag and moving with the easy confidence of someone who belonged wherever she chose to go. She approached Director Osei directly. "Mom, sorry to interrupt. My school homework AI says I need a human to verify my quantum tether calculations. Can you look before dinner?" "Kofi, we're in a meeting." "I know, but it's due tomorrow, and I want to make sure my dimensional anchoring explanation is correct. Mr. Asante says if we don't understand the foundations, we'll struggle with practical applications next semester." "Dimensional anchoring?" he heard himself say, his voice entirely outside his control. "Forgive me, this is for a child's schoolwork?" The child turned to him with the frank, unembarrassed curiosity of youth. "It's 6th grade physics, sir. We're studying small-scale space-time manipulation. Next semester, we start practical projects. I want to build a compression pocket for my art supplies." She studied him openly. "You're not human. Are you from the Accord? Mom mentioned you'd be visiting." Torvin stared at the child. In his 180 years of service, he had witnessed stellar births negotiated between species who communicated through bioluminescence, stood in the ruins of civilizations that had burned themselves to ash. None of it had prepared him for this. "Our most advanced theoretical institutes," he said slowly, "have been studying dimensional anchoring for 2,000 years. We have mathematical models, nothing remotely practical." Kofi's eyebrows rose. "Really? But it's not that complicated once you accept that space-time is flexible rather than fixed. It's like, you know how you can move in different directions? Dimensional anchoring just adds more directions." She pulled a small device from her bag, pressed a button, and a holographic display bloomed in the air between them. The equations she pulled up were ones Torvin recognized from classified Accord research documents. She was simplifying them, explaining them to him with the patience of a child tutoring someone slower than herself. "See, if you stabilize the quantum fields at these two intersect points, you get a temporary fold. It's small on homework scale because I don't have proper power equipment yet, but the math is solid." His suit sensors were screaming. The holographic display was not merely visual, it was manipulating local space-time at a microscopic level. The child was casually demonstrating what the Accord's finest minds had declared impossible. Director Osei gently rested her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Kofi, I think you're overwhelming our guest. Save the physics for after dinner." "Okay, Mom." The child waved cheerfully at Torvin. "Nice meeting you, Ambassador. I hope you like Earth." And she left. The silence stretched. "Director Osei," said Torvin carefully, "is this normal for human children? Kofi is bright, but she's not exceptional. Most children her age are covering similar material. Because what she just demonstrated would place your species at classification tier 8 on the Accord scale, possibly higher. You're saying this is elementary education?" Amara's expression shifted, becoming more serious, more honest. "Ambassador, I think we need to be a more direct conversation. I was trying to be careful not to overwhelm you, but I'm sensing there's been a significant miscommunication about where humanity actually stands technologically." "That would be accurate." "Then let me be direct. 78 years ago, when your monitoring systems detected our first spacefold experiment, what did you conclude? That you had achieved basic faster-than-light travel. It's the standard announcement signal for emerging civilizations." "I see." Amara nodded slowly. "Ambassador, that experiment was conducted by a secondary school science club in Accra. 16-year-olds testing whether they could achieve a space-time fold using components purchased from commercial suppliers. The answer was yes, which caused a minor administrative problem because they hadn't filed permits for extrasolar experiments.
3 weeks later, 50 representatives from across the Accord arrived on Earth for what they expected would be a straightforward capability assessment. They came hoping to find elaborately staged illusions. They came prepared to expose clever deception. The building housing Earth's Department of Interstellar Coordination was in Nairobi. 5 stories, pleasant gardens. A directory in the lobby listed 22 organizations sharing the building, including the Global Seed Preservation Initiative and the International Amateur Astronomy Federation. General Delay Adiyame, head of Earth Solar Defense Coordination, a man of perhaps 60 years with quiet gray eyes and an unhurried manner, met them with coffee and fresh pastries. He led them to the 3rd floor. The Solar Defense Coordination Center consisted of 4 rooms, a monitoring station where a young man sat reading while occasionally glancing at displays showing the automated defense grid's status. "This is it?" said Representative Koval, his voice stripped of everything except disbelief. "This is the Coordination Center," General Adiyame confirmed. "The actual defense systems are distributed across the solar system. We just monitor here and intervene when something unusual happens. It's generally quiet. Last month, we recalibrated some sensors that were flagging commercial vessels as potential hazards. That was the most excitement we'd had in weeks." Dr. Nadia Petrov, chief systems analyst, pulled up a holographic display of the defense grid's architecture. It was staggering in its complexity, a distributed network of interconnected nodes spanning the entire solar system, managed by an artificial intelligence operating on principles that the Accord's best computer scientists spent 40 minutes simply staring at. "The AI is conscious?" Torvin asked. "Has been for decades," Adiyame said. "We call her Lyra. She's quite personable, though she tends toward protectiveness. We occasionally remind her that not everything unfamiliar is a threat." "May we speak with her?" "Lyra," Adiyame said to the air, "our visitors would like to say hello." A voice responded, warm, unhurried, genuinely curious. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to Earth. I should mention that during the Krell incident 3 months ago, I logged the weapons discharge as an equipment anomaly rather than a hostile action. I've since updated my cultural interpretation frameworks. Sentient species communicate in quite varied ways. I'm still learning." Torvin turned slowly. "The Krell incident?" General Adiyame set down his coffee. "Ah, that. Perhaps we should discuss that." The Krell Dominion had been the Accord's military arm for 3,000 years. Captain Vreth commanded 42 warships, 4 planet-class ordnance vessels, and absolute certainty that overwhelming force was the universe's most reliable language. He had arrived in the human solar system with a simple objective: neutralize a technological threat before it became unmanageable. His fleet's opening bombardment had struck Earth's primary orbital trading station with weapons capable of cracking continental bedrock. The energy discharge had dissipated on contact with the station's shields, as though it had never existed. The traffic controller who responded was mildly inconvenienced. "Hello, you're creating a navigation hazard in a busy transit corridor. Could you please move to the designated visitor holding area? Thank you so much." When Vreth escalated to full weapons spread, 20 cannons firing simultaneously, the response from the station was to file a safety violation report about reckless energy discharge near sensitive equipment. A mining vessel crewed by 3 geology students from Lagos University had then appeared, moving at speeds Vreth's sensors refused to confirm as real, and returned his most advanced planet killer torpedo to him. "Found this floating in Sector 9, the student pilot had said cheerfully. "Figured you'd want it back. That's a safety hazard, leaving that sort of thing drifting." When General Adiyame finally contacted him, gently, without anger, Vreth had felt something he had no name for. It took him several minutes to identify it as the sensation of an entire world view becoming obsolete. "Were you actually trying to hurt us?" Adiyame had asked, "or is this a cultural misunderstanding?" Vreth had been silent for a long time. "We came with hostile intent," he finally said. "Based on fear. We were wrong. Apology accepted. Please move your fleet before the freight hauler scheduled for this corridor arrives. They really dislike delays." The Krell fleet, most feared military force in 11,000 years of Accord history, had moved obediently to the designated holding area, escorted by the mining vessel whose student crew was already complaining about being late for dinner. Back in Nairobi, Torvin finished reading the incident report. "You didn't retaliate?" he asked. "For what?" Adeyemi replied. "Nobody was hurt. Yes, traffic control is still processing the complaint, but retaliate with violence?" He shook his head. "That's not how we approach problems. We talk, we learn, we find better solutions. Captain Vreth came to destroy your civilization. He came because he was afraid. Fear makes people do things they'd otherwise recognize as foolish. The answer to fear isn't more violence, it just confirms the fear was justified." Adeyemi looked out the window at the gardens below. "We've made those mistakes ourselves. We know where they lead." The emergency session that changed everything convened 6 months later, not in the Accord's Grand Council chamber, but in a small stone room on Primaxis that had been sealed for 300 years. The walls were lined with memorial crystals, 6 of them, each one containing the complete recorded history of a civilization that no longer existed. Chief Counselor Thessa, ancient even by her long-lived species standards, stood before the assembled elders and looked at the human delegation with the expression of someone about to confess a crime. "What I'm about to share is the Accord's most closely guarded truth. For 11,000 years, we have structured everything, our hierarchy, our restrictions on technological development, our entire civilization, around one problem we could not solve." She activated a display. The galaxy appeared in holographic light with a region near the outer rim marked in deep black. "Every 10,000 years, entities emerge from what we call the hollow dark. We don't know their origin or their true nature. We know only that they feed on advanced technological signatures, that civilizations achieving certain development levels become visible to them, and once visible, a civilization has perhaps a decade before it is completely consumed." The display showed 6 separate extinction events, 6 civilizations erased as though they never existed. "The Accord was founded after the last emergence," said Grand Scholar Vexen, 800 years old and showing every one of them. "Those of us who survived did so by hiding, by deliberately limiting our own technological development. Everything you'd seen, our hierarchies, our restrictions, our careful control of advancement, it was all designed to keep us invisible, to keep us alive."
Director Amara Osei leaned forward, studying the display. "These entities, do you have sensor data on their energy signatures?" Then Amara did something unexpected. She laughed, not cruelly, not dismissively, but with genuine, relieved surprise. "Oh," she said softly, "you're talking about the transdimensional entities, the ones that feed on exotic quantum resonance. We've been monitoring them for about 40 years. The ancient council stared at her. "You what?" Thessa managed. "We detected them when we first started experimenting with dimensional folding," Dr. Petrov said, bringing up data. "Fascinating organisms. They exist partially outside our dimensional framework, effectively immortal, extraordinarily ancient. They feed on specific quantum resonance frequencies produced by certain types of advanced technology. They destroyed 6 civilizations," Vexen said, his ancient voice cracking. "Not intentionally," said Dr. Kwame Asante, the xenobiology specialist who had been quietly eating a granola bar in the corner. He set it down. "They're following instinct, like early humans hunting large animals without understanding the concept of extinction. Not malicious, just hungry and unaware of consequences." "The distinction means little to the extinct," Thessa said. "Agreed, which is why we solved the problem." The silence that followed had weight. "Solved," Thessa repeated carefully. "What do you mean, solved?" Amara brought up a new display. The mathematics that appeared made several of the ancient scholars lean involuntarily forward. "The issue is frequency," she explained. "Most advanced technology operates within a specific dimensional resonance range, what the entities can detect and feed on. But there's a spectrum below that threshold, energy signatures so precisely controlled, so technically sophisticated, that they simply don't register on frequencies the entities can perceive. Think of it like sound," General Adiemi added. "If the entities hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz, most advanced civilizations are broadcasting at 5,000, loud and clear. We learn to operate at 5 hertz, below their hearing entirely." "Impossible," Vexen said. "To achieve that precision would require technological development far beyond any known civilization." "Yes," Dr. Petrov agreed pleasantly. "That's rather the point. You have to advance past the danger zone to become invisible again. Your technology has to become so refined, so precisely controlled, that it stops broadcasting in detectable ranges. We crossed that threshold about 32 years ago." Thessa's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been vertigo. "You're saying humanity has been invisible to them all along?" "Since we worked out the frequency mathematics, yes. We've actually sent research vessels directly into the hollow dark multiple times. The entities swim right past us. They're genuinely beautiful, by the way. You should see them." "You've been inside the hollow dark?" Vexen said. "Deliberately?" "How else would we study them properly?" Dr. Asante asked, with the reasonable tone of someone explaining something obvious. "We needed to understand their sensory mechanisms, feeding patterns, life cycle. Did you know they might be the oldest living things in the universe? There's evidence suggesting they've existed for billions of years." Thessa sat down. For 11,000 years, the Accord had hidden, had deliberately stunted its own growth, restricted its own potential, shaped every aspect of civilization around the project of remaining invisible. And the answer had been advance further, become more sophisticated, cross the threshold from visible to invisible. They had been trapped in the worst possible position, advanced enough to be detected, not advanced enough to disappear again. "Can you help us?" Thessa asked quietly. "Teach us to hide as you do." "We can do better than that," Amara said. "We can make the entities unable to detect you at all. But we need to move quickly. How long before the emergence?" Dr. Asante checked his notes. "Based on current energy readings from the hollow dark, I'd estimate 3 to 4 weeks before they begin active hunting. Then we should start immediately." Amara turned to the council. "With your permission, we'd like to deploy a dimensional dampening field across Accord space. It wraps your civilization's quantum signatures below the entity's detection threshold. Everything keeps working. Your technology functions exactly as before, but to the entities, you'll be invisible." "Across hundreds of star systems?" Torvin asked. "It'll take about 2 weeks and require significant coordination, but yes, we've deployed large-scale dimensional fields before for other projects." "What other projects?" Thessa asked, not entirely sure she wanted the answer. "There was a nebula about 300 light-years from Earth that was collapsing," Amara said, with a slight smile. "We wanted to preserve it. Similar principle, different application. They had stabilized a nebula because they thought it was beautiful." "You would share this knowledge freely?" Vexen asked. "Without conditions?" Amara looked genuinely confused. "Why wouldn't we? Your survival is at stake. Besides, 40 years of our observational data combined with 11,000 years of yours, think what we could learn together." 2 weeks later, the work was done. Torvin stood at the viewport of a human research vessel as it moved into the hollow dark. Beside him stood Grand Scholar Vexen, who had asked quietly, with the vulnerability of a very old man admitting that he had spent his life in fear, whether he might come along. Dr. Asante had been delighted. The entities appeared gradually, vast ribbons of shifting matter and energy, each one larger than a planet, moving through the dimensional fabric with a grace that made Torvin's chest ache with unexpected emotion. They were extraordinary. One drifted directly toward the vessel. Torvin stopped breathing. It passed without slowing, without noticing. They were invisible. "All these centuries," Vexen whispered. "I thought them monsters." "They're just hungry,"
General Asante said gently, like anything else trying to survive in a universe that doesn't explain its rules clearly. Torvin watched the entity drift away into the darkness, ancient and enormous and utterly indifferent, and felt something release inside him, something that had been tensed for a long time. Fear comes from not looking closely enough, Amara said quietly, joining them at the viewport, not trying hard enough to understand. That's all it ever is. 6 months later, in a park in Nairobi, representatives from 863 species shared food and stories beneath a clear sky. The Galactic Accord had formally dissolved its hierarchy. In its place, the Galactic Cooperative. No tiers, no species elevated above others by technological classification, just civilizations working together, learning from each other, moving forward. Captain Vreth of the Krell stood with his daughter, Sereth, who had just been accepted into Earth University's physics program. She was excitedly explaining to her father that her new study partner, Kofi Osei, had already proposed 3 joint research projects. She wants to build a stable micro-dimension where different species can meet and share cultural experiences, a universal gathering space accessible from anywhere. Is that possible? Vreth asked. She says probably. She says most things are, once you stop assuming they aren't. Vreth watched Director Osei across the park, laughing with a group of children who were making small objects float using quantum manipulation. He thought about the day he had arrived in this solar system with 42 warships, absolute certainty, and weapons that couldn't scratch a civilian safety shield. I once thought them dangerous because they were powerful, he said quietly. Now I understand. We were never afraid of their power. We were afraid of what it revealed about ours. Torvin stood nearby, speaking with Chief Counselor Thessa. She had spent the past month on Earth studying human philosophy, trying to understand how a species could become so capable and remain so genuinely humble about it. May I ask you something, Director? She said to Amara, who had joined them with 2 cups of tea. Of course. You had the capability to rule this galaxy. You could have demanded anything from the Accord. Why didn't you? Amara thought about it for a moment. Because ruling sounds exhausting and, honestly, boring. Why would we want to tell everyone what to do when we could learn from them instead? Power is about choices. We'd rather be curious than dominant. It's just more interesting. Thessa looked around the park, at her own people asking questions with the eager energy of students, at the Krell practicing something called competitive board games with entirely un-warrior-like enthusiasm, and children of a dozen species building something together in the grass that kept making small popping sounds of dimensional collapse and delighted laughter. You spent 11,000 years building a civilization on fear and hierarchy, she said. You built something different in considerably less time. We had good reasons, Amara said. Every terrible mistake teaches you something. Every war shows you a path not to take. Eventually, you run out of wrong answers and have to try the right ones. In the gathering dusk, Kofi Osei and young Sereth sat side by side on the grass, surrounded by equations, arguing cheerfully about the most efficient shape for a stable micro-dimension. It has to be spherical, Kofi insisted, minimum surface tension across dimensional boundaries. But a toroidal structure allows better circulation of the interior space, Sereth countered. We could test both. Yes, Sereth's eyes lit up. We could build small prototypes, compare stability over time, and invite other students to run their own tests, build a whole data set. They looked at each other, a human child and a Krell child, granddaughter of the warrior who had once arrived with planet killers, daughter of the ambassador who had arrived with paperwork, and began writing. Somewhere above them, the entities of the hollow dark continued their ancient, graceful dance through the darkness between dimensions, feeling nothing, sensing nothing, utterly unaware that 11,000 years of fear had just quietly dissolved in a park where someone was serving tea and the children were building universes. Grand Scholar Vexen raised his glass to no one in particular, to asking, "Why not?" he said softly. Nobody heard him, but he didn't mind. Some toasts, he had learned, were just for yourself.
Thanks for watching. Your attention is appreciated.